Aotearoa Climate Action Network, Tamaki Makoto, welcomes you to our July Hui Speaker Spotlight.
So let's get to Miss a big round of applause.
Hello everyone, kia ora. My name is Aigagalefili and I'm the node coordinator for Aotearoa Climate Action Network. This presentation came off the back of a summit last 2 weeks ago, which was hosted by the Australian Council for International Development and the Pacific Islands Association for Non-Government Organisations. It was held in Nadi, Fiji, and it was to coordinate a regional pathway to COP30, the Pacific Islands Forum Leadership Meeting, and COP31. So if you didn't know, Australia has put in a bid to co-host with the Pacific next year for COP31, which gives us as a region a very strong strategical pathway to push through onto the international stage a lot of the demands that we want, not just as nations, but as the Pacific region. First of all, who are ALCAN? We are a civil society network of 52 collectives, NGOs and movements that work across climate justice and climate action. At its core, we believe that climate action and climate justice is a commitment, intentionality, and a discipline. A commitment to being the type of ancestor that we want our descendants to have. And when it comes to the strategic pathway, not just for our communities, but for our national declarations of commitment that we want to put to all of our governments, not just Australia and New Zealand, but the Pacific Islands too. That is the positionality and the intentionality that we're working with. We work more as a convening and facilitating body. We do host educational webinars called the Brown Paper Bag webinars. Those are run by our representative from World Vision, Dr. Olivia Yates. We're also always open to new organizations joining our network. So if you are interested, there is a sign-up form and process on our ALCAN website. And yeah, we tend to add some society relationships with Australia through CAN Australia, and with the Pacific Islands through Pacific Islands CAN. So what is the role of civil society? I don't think that I need to be preaching to the choir, but obviously we bridge the gap between communities and negotiations. A lot of the high-level legislation that gets put through at the Pacific Islands Forum meeting, of which New Zealand is a part of, trickles down into those negotiation tables at COP. And so when it comes to mobilizing our demands, PCAN has put out about 13 different demands for their climate justice demands 2025, and ALCAN has made a strong commitment to vocalizing and putting pressure on our Australian counterparts and colleagues to also commit to those commitments. Some of those commitments look like committing to the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, which looks at phasing out fossil fuels across the Pacific region, and that looks like different things and different avenues to our own national context, of course. Nice. We also have a unique more authority and agility. That means different things for Aotearoa. Aotearoa is very uniquely positioned when it comes to our regional relationships. Geopolitically, we're more aligned with Australia, but obviously when it comes to our ecological heritage, our whakapapa, our cultural roots, we're more aligned with the Pacific Islands. So when it comes to all these big international forums, it gives civil society from Aotearoa a great strategical advantage to not just stand in solidarity with our Pacific partners, but also make sure that Australia is keeping up with that commitment as well. So, what happened at the summit? We put out all of these goals, some of those goals that the Pacific Islands Climate Action Network came up with. Very hard to condense to 5 main ones, but we are still in the process of making sure that those 5 main goals from the 13 goals are not just applicable across the region, but can be contextualized to each nation. So that looks like 1.5 degree aligned action. You may know that at previous COPs, different countries and organizations have been pushing for a commitment to 2 degrees as the new goal, but 1.5 degrees is basically we can't go beyond that because it means that low-lying developing states, they just won't survive if we don't stick to that 1.5 commitment. And so climate finance justice, you would have seen recently the International Court of Justice, they released an advisory opinion that states can be held accountable and there could be repercussions for the impacts of all the pollution and all of the policies and all the really, really bad things that we know about. But that work actually came off the back of Pacific Island students fighting for climate justice. And so that is a group of students from Vanuatu. They campaigned for a long, long time, had a lot of support from Aotearoa, from our camp, and got it across the line. So I'm trying really fast to make sure that I'm getting all of this under 5 minutes. And then we have our fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty and support for loss and damages fund. And yeah, the protections of oceans, food sovereignty, and cultural survival. For our region, that looks very complex because we have seabed mining in Taranaki here in Aotearoa, but we also have the exploration of deep sea mining across the Pacific region. So those two things are two sides of the same coin, which means that we need to be coordinating as civil societies to make sure that we are doing things efficiently and that we're utilizing those big platforms like COP to put pressure on the Pacific Islands Forum to say no to deep sea mining, as well as our own government to say no to seabed mining. Aotearoa's responsibility. Like I said before, we are very uniquely placed in terms of what we can achieve. When it comes to the civil society space, the climate space, we're so under-resourced, and this was communicated at the summit. Compared to our Australian counterparts, we're under-resourced, there's public service cuts, there's a lot of things happening. But our strength, I believe, and our camp believes, is our relationality, knowing exactly how we're positioning, how to utilize that. The strengths in our storytelling, the strengths in our mobilizing, those are things that we can really draw on when it comes to the strategic pathway. So increasing our climate ambition through reform, re-emergence, and revolution. I'm just going to break down very quickly what that means in the ALCAN context. When it comes to reform, we have a lot of our members who are doing amazing things through legislation. Our Ngāpuhi Kaumatua, Mike Smith, who is the climate chairperson for the National Iwi Chairs Forum, he's currently taking 7 of Aotearoa's largest polluting companies to the Supreme Court. And then we have the Environmental Law Initiative and Lawyers for Climate Action New Zealand. They've recently come out with a case taking our Minister for Climate Change to court around the emissions reduction plan. Sorry, so many acronyms to keep up with. Yeah, so when it comes to reform, that's probably the stream where we have to be really precise with what we're doing. So at the same time that we have organizations like the Pacific Island students going to the ICJ and having through all of that work to make sure it gets across the line. In Australia, the Torres Strait Islanders, they recently lost their case against the Australian government for all of their pollution. And so, yeah, making sure that we're having all of those things going at the same time to make sure that even if we lose in one space, we're winning in others is really important to keep up the morale of our civil society, as well as making sure that we can get those things across the line as much as we can. Re-emergence is more so about making sure that our communities are safe no matter what is happening at those high-level discussions. So things like kai sovereignty, community flood resilience, leaning into our traditional ecological knowledge is kind of what happens even if everything goes to trash and nothing that we want happens. On a practical level, our civil societies are safe, and that we're still being able to communicate that education and do those things in our community, which I know so many of you in this room already do, which is great. And then revolution sounds scary, and it's not that scary. That is just about mobilization, a lot of the things that Emily talked about, making sure that climate education is accessible, that we're meeting people where they're at and not shaming them for the things that they don't know. All of that revolutionary work, yes, it comes in the form of protests and all of those things, but it's all a three-pronged approach. You can't have reform and re-emergence and revolution without any of the two other things. They don't work just on their own. And then again, like I said, supporting Pacific priorities internationally by amplifying our alternative whanaunga demands. Trying to talk really fast. What does that mean? Recognizing that Indigenous peoples at these forums, they need to be represented properly. We need to make sure that those who are representing these communities in those rooms hold the proper mandate, and they're not just there as tokens or to be used by any organization or government. So that means coordinating that across our region in alignment with, but also independently from, our climate civil society groups. And yeah, that's pretty much what CCAN is doing in the lead up to COP30, 31 and the Pacific Islands Forum in a nutshell. Thank you very much.